Hello and welcome back to Flipped Psychology. I'm Miss Lee, and in this video we're going to be covering Unit 4, Lifespan Development, Section 2, Developmental Theories. Our objectives will be to identify cognitive, moral, and social development theories. If you haven't done so already, go ahead and grab your notes and let's get started. Okay, so the first topic we're going to cover is cognitive development. And one of the most important theorists out there for child cognitive development is Jean Piaget. His was a 4-stage theory of cognitive development and focused primarily on children up to adolescence. So his first stage was the sensory motor stage, and this is when babies learn how to coordinate their sensation and perception with motor activity. So the easiest way to remember this stage is senses, sensory, motor, getting around. So babies are learning how to crawl, they're learning how to actually get around in their world, and they are usually learning from their senses. So everything is being touched, they're putting things in their mouth, so they're really getting a sense of the world through how they are experiencing it. Then you have the pre-operational stage. During this stage, children begin to use language to represent objects. This is before a formal way of learning. This is usually through toddlerhood up to about the point that a child would enter school. And during this period, kids are learning to talk. That's kind of the primary task in this stage, is learning how to use words to represent ideas and thoughts. So right around the time that children enter a more formal school setting, like first grade, stage 3 begins, and this is the concrete operational stage. During this time, you start seeing the very first inklings of adult thinking. So children are using logic, they're using patterns, they're kind of connecting the dots more than they were able to before. And then you have lastly the formal operational stage, and this begins around puberty and represents cognitive maturity. This is one of the drawbacks of Piaget's theory, is that it really kind of ends at puberty. It does not encompass the entire lifespan. But what he did in a very brilliant way. He really focused very specifically on child development, and to be fair, Piaget really only was interested in child development. So here are some of the major concepts that he came up with related to the sensory motor stage. The first one on your screen is object permanence, and this is basically the understanding that even though you may not see an object, it still continues to exist. Until children are able to accomplish object permanence, they enjoy playing peekaboo just endlessly, because it's really fascinating how you can hide behind your hands and disappear from the world. If a baby rolls a ball under a couch, they don't look for it because it's just gone. When a baby accomplishes object permanence, they realize that even though someone has left the room, they do still exist in the world. The next concept is egocentrism, and this is a child's inability to understand another person's point of view. They don't understand looking at a situation from another person's perspective, and they can't see literally other people's perspectives. Like, they can't understand that what you see physically may be different from what I see. Artificialism is that natural events are made by people. They don't understand how weather works. They don't understand how seasons change. They really attribute it to either humans or sometimes fantastical creatures. And then the last concept on the screen is animatism. And this is the belief that objects like stuffed animals or toys are alive and conscious. Some more of Piaget's concepts that were included in his theory and have really made their way into mainstream psychology are the ideas that you see on your screen now: schema, assimilation, and accommodation. And this was Piaget's ideas about how children begin to organize their world, how they organize their thoughts. The first word that you see on your screen, schema, basically refers to concepts or frameworks that people use to organize and interpret information. This is a person's picture of the world. This is how you understand your world to be. Assimilation is how a child interprets a new experience within the context of what they already know to be the world, their schema. So assimilation is fitting a new piece of information into an existing idea or representation of the world. So they believe that the new experience is similar enough to other previous experiences to kind of make sense of that new experience. Accommodation is adapting their current schema. They have to reorganize the way that they understand their world to incorporate new information. The new experience is so novel that the person's entire understanding of the universe or their world has to change to accommodate it. And I'm going to give you some examples of how that works. So let's say we have a little girl named Jocelyn, and 2-year-old Jocelyn has just learned the schema for dog from her picture book. She's never seen a dog, the family doesn't have a dog, but she now understands the idea of dog. Jocelyn is out for a walk with her mom and she sees a cat and she calls it dog. She's trying to assimilate the new information into her pre-existing understanding of her world. She figures that the cat has 4 legs, it's fluffy, and it looks enough like a dog that perhaps it's a dog. She calls it dog and her mom corrects her and tells her no, it's a cat. So at this point, Jocelyn has to accommodate her schema for 4-legged animals and continues to modify that schema to include different kinds of dogs and cats in the neighborhood, so that poodles and labs are in the schema for dogs and kittens and big fluffy tomcats are in the same schema for cats, but that the schemas also fall under a grander understanding of what an animal in her neighborhood might look like. So major concepts in later stages. Conservation, which is during the concrete operational stage, happens when a child understands that just changing the form or the shape of a substance or object doesn't change its overall amount, volume, or mass. So you can change the shape of a Play-Doh ball into a flattened pancake, and it's still the same amount of mass. It's still the same amount of Play-Doh. Abstract thought is in the formal operational stage, and this is the ability to think about objects, principles, and ideas that aren't physically present. You can start thinking about the theory of the universe or what happens after we die, things that we can't possibly know right now, but we have the capability of thinking about at this abstract formal operational stage of development. Okay, so what are the stages of Kohlberg's theory of moral development? What is moral development? Kohlberg believed that the stages of moral development follow a specific sequence, that you start at pre-conventional, and this is usually through about the age of 9. Most children at this point base their judgment on the consequence of behavior. So they're really just trying to keep someone happy. They're just trying to please their teacher or not get in trouble with their parents. The conventional level, these are usually school-aged kids, and at this point judgments are made in terms of whether an act is conforming to what we know of as a society to be right and wrong. So it's following the rules no matter what. It's walking in a straight line no matter what and not deviating because it's right or wrong. It's very black and white. There's no kind of in the middle. There's no gray there. And then you have a post-conventional level, and this is where the reasoning is based on a person's own moral standards of goodness. So someone may have to sacrifice a lot. Someone may have to, give up certain things to satisfy their own moral standards of goodness. So let's have an example of what this looks like. So at the pre-conventional level, you have a student here who is thinking to himself, I better do well on this worksheet or the teacher will be mad at me. So very much trying to just kind of keep the peace, make everyone happy, not get in trouble. At this conventional level, student clearly has a book report that she is presenting, and she's thinking to herself, I hope I do as well as everyone else in the class on this book report so I don't stand out. She doesn't want to get embarrassed. She doesn't want to, kind of make waves. She wants to do well enough, but not so well that she is called out. And then this last guy, he's thinking to himself at the post-conventional level, my new approach to distributing food could end hunger in the world. And he is, it looks like he's studying in maybe a library late at night. The moon is kind of shining through the window. He's clearly working very hard where he may not even have to, but this is at the post-conventional level. He's doing something for other people just because it's the right thing to do. Okay, so there are some criticisms of Kohlberg. Kohlberg primarily noted that women seem to be deficient in their moral reasoning abilities. This idea was not well received by Carol Gilligan. Dr. Gilligan was a research assistant of Kohlberg, and she developed her own ideas as a result of working with him and really kind of pushing back on what he believed. She criticized Kohlberg because it was based only on upper class white men and boys. So the research that he did was not diverse enough to really be able to generalize to anyone except for upper class white men and boys who participated in his research. She also argued that women aren't deficient in their moral reasoning, but that males and females reason differently, that girls and women focus more on staying connected and the importance of interpersonal relationships. Okay, so moving on to social development, let's talk about Harry Harlow. Harry Harlow did some very controversial research related to attachment in baby rhesus monkeys. And basically, what he said was that attachment begins at about the age of 4 months when infants develop specific attachments to their main caregivers. Now, his research was not on human babies, but on baby monkeys. And while his research certainly had some ethical quandaries, we can learn a lot from his findings. So let's watch this video of Harry Harlow and his monkeys.
Let me show you a monkey raised on a nursing wire mother. Now here are 106's two mothers. As you can see, it was weaned on a wire mother. Here's baby 106. Watch.
He's going to the wire mother.
He's got to eat to live.
Oh, he's going back.
He's back on the cloth mother, and he'll stay on the cloth mother. Actually, this baby spends from 17 to 18 hours a day on the cloth mother and less than 1 hour a day on the wire mother. We had predicted that the variable of contact comfort would be a variable of measurable importance, but we were unprepared to find that it completely overwhelmed and overshadowed all other variables, including those of nursing.
Frankly, Doctor, if it comes to a choice between wire and cloth, it's reasonable to expect that any child will go to the cloth. It's a matter of creature comfort, like a baby with its blanket. But is this really love?
Well, what do you mean by saying that a baby loves its mother? Certainly one thing we mean is that it gets a great feeling of security in the presence of the mother. Now, Mr. Collingwood, wouldn't you say that if you frightened a baby, that it went running to its mother, was comforted, and then all the fear disappeared and was replaced by a complete sense of security that that baby loved its mother? Now, in this experiment, this is the apparatus we use.
That looks diabolical.
That's just the way the baby monkey feels about it. Flashing eyes, loud sounds, moving mechanical parts, all of these things are designed to frighten a monkey. Now here we have a peaceful, resting baby monkey. Let's find out what his reactions to his mother are when we frighten him. What any child will do in a similar situation.
He runs away.
It's more than running away. He was running to his mother, to touch her, to drive away his fear. Contact with the mother changes his entire personality. Look, now he's actually threatening the diabolical object. All right. This gives us part of the picture of the strength of infantile love. This is a 6-foot square room with a few toys and other objects. But to the monkey, it's much more menacing. We know that when our own children are taken to a strange place without their mothers, they are often overwhelmed with fear. This room is just such a new and strange environment for the baby monkeys. No mother is in there. Now, let's put a monkey into the room. Notice how cautiously he enters the room. He's searching for comfort, but nothing relieves his disturbance. Now we'll take the baby monkey out and put in a wire mother.
Now, this one was nursed by a wire mother.
That's right, all his life.
She doesn't seem to help much.
Now, we'll try the same test with a cloth mother in the room. You see the contrast in the behavior? Despite the fact that the wire mother nursed him, she could offer this infant nothing in the way of affection or security. But here the monkey, by rubbing against the cloth mother, as if he were seeking as much contact comfort as he could get, builds up his reservoir of affection and security. First, his body relaxes as the fear disappears. But above and beyond this, new positive response patterns appear. He now goes out to explore and investigate this new, strange world. He is now a normal, happy, curious baby.
Okay, we're going to continue with social development of infants and children, and now we're going to talk about Konrad Lorenz. Konrad Lorenz was actually not a psychologist. He studied the habits of different kinds of birds, and what he started noticing was something that other people had noticed in the past, but he put a name to it, and this was the concept of imprinting. What this is, it refers to a critical period of time early in an animal's life when it forms an attachment and develops a concept of its own identity based on that attachment. So what he did was that he found that if he was the first thing that geese or ducks saw, they would imprint on him, and basically everything that they learned, they would learn from him. He also discovered that birds and certain mammals are born with a pre-programmed drive to imprint onto their mother. All right, so let's talk about parenting and the influence of parenting on infants and children's social development. First, we'll talk about the different styles of parenting. There are two characteristics that we look at when it comes to parenting, and that's whether a parent is warm or cold, and whether a parent is strict or permissive. So warm parents show a great deal of affection for their children. Cold parents may not show as much affection towards their children. Strict parents impose very strict rules, whereas permissive parents impose fewer rules. So basically, the combination of these different types of parenting, the two characteristics, the warm, cold, or strict permissive characteristics, are what's going to lead to whether a parent is authoritative, authoritarian, permissive, cold, or abuse. So basically, when you have a warm, strict parenting style, This is considered to be authoritative. So you've got the boundaries, you've got the affection, you've got the ability to be a little bit flexible, but maintain consistency in parenting. And this is considered to be the most ideal way of parenting. I usually remember authoritative. It's got two T's, which look like plus signs. So the plus is the good one, and that's just my way of kind of remembering. It's my mnemonic. Authoritarian is a cold, strict parent. So they're not showing any affection. They're very strict and rigid. It's like it's my way or the highway. That's the authoritarian parenting style. Permissive is maybe warm and permissive. So they're nice, they're lovely parents, they love their kids, they may be affectionate, but they really let the kids kind of rule the roost. They run the show. And then you've got cold or abusive parents, and this is where the parent is cold, so they're not showing any affection, but they're also really permitting them to do whatever they want. They can be neglectful. So this is kind of the absence of really any intervention from a parent. You also have influences from their child care. And childcare has both positive and negative effects on social development. So it really depends. On how good the child care facility is, how good the teachers are, and it depends on the care that's given. If they're responsive, if they have a very lively environment with a lot of socializing, with some opportunities to learn, to pretend, and a very stimulating environment. It can be a very positive experience. However, there are some very bad situations of where childcare has gone terribly wrong. And this last concept on your screen is self-esteem. And this is basically the value or worth that people attach to themselves. So all of these interactions with caregivers early on will help shape or mold a child's self-esteem, their ideas of themselves. So let's talk about one of the most famous social development theorists, Erikson. This was the first lifespan development theory that really truly across the lifespan. He created an 8-stage theory of social development, and each stage had its own psychosocial developmental task. Now, what I think is really interesting is when I was going through school, the tasks were originally considered to be crises. And so you had to successfully go through and navigate a crisis, usually some big dramatic something, and then come out on the other end having learned this wonderful life lesson. It's changed, in that period of time since I was in school. Now it's kind of known as more of a developmental task that you have to accomplish. So let's go through each of these 8 stages. Okay, so the first stage is trust versus mistrust. This is approximately up to a year. Basically, if you consider the fact that an infant is completely dependent on its caregivers, you would see how going through this developmental task, if the needs of the child are dependably met, the child is going to develop a basic sense of trust. If not, mistrust. During the toddlerhood, children are going out into the world, they're experiencing things, they're learning to do things for themselves, and if they aren't allowed to go through those tasks and kind of learn the hard way sometimes, they begin to doubt their abilities. So this issue is autonomy versus shame and doubt. Preschoolers, or kids around 3 to 5 years, this is the stage known as initiative versus guilt. So preschoolers learn to initiate tasks, they carry out plans, they are usually socializing with other little 3 to 5-year-old preschoolers, and if they are made to feel guilty about their efforts to be independent, they can start developing guilt. The next stage is competence versus inferiority. So this is through the elementary school age years. This is about 6 years to puberty. And during this time, children learn how to really apply themselves and derive pleasure from accomplishing the task. And if they don't, they feel inferior about themselves. You might have heard of the term an inferiority complex. Well, this is Erikson. This is straight from his theory. One of the things that he said would happen if a child did not come out of the competence versus inferiority stage would be that the child would have an inferiority complex for the rest of their life. That's one thing to remember about Erikson's stages, is that you have to accomplish the first stage to go on to the next, and so on and so on. So you can't kind of move around in the stages according to Erikson. The next stage is adolescence, and the name of this stage is called identity versus role confusion. You might have even heard of maybe an identity crisis. Again, this is straight from Erikson's theory. Basically, during this time, teenagers work at refining who they are, what the sense of self is. They test out roles, and they start combining those roles to form a single identity. or they become confused about who they are. If they're not allowed to kind of change their role from time to time, change jobs, look at different career paths, they become confused. The next stage is intimacy versus isolation, and this is during young adulthood. Basically, it's this time of life where young adults are struggling to form close relationships, and if they aren't able to gain the capacity for intimate love, they begin to feel socially isolated. The next stage is in the middle adulthood, or the 40s to 60s. This is generativity versus stagnation. So basically, people in their middle age discover a sense of contributing back to the world. They're giving back, usually through family or work activities. And if they don't, they may feel a lack of purpose. You may have heard of a midlife crisis. Well, this is straight from Erikson. And this last stage is integrity versus despair. During this stage, during late adulthood, basically someone is going to look back on their life, and the older adult may feel a sense of satisfaction, and if they don't feel like they are satisfied, they might feel like they're a failure and fall into despair. Okay, our last developmental theorist is James Marcia, and he came up with this idea of identity formations. He kind of piggybacked on Erikson's idea of identity versus role confusion, and he really theorized and built his ideas around how an identity is formed. It's the process of developing a sense of who one is and what one stands for. His theory assumes that a mature and well-adjusted person possesses a well-defined and individually determined identity. If you look at the chart on your screen, you're going to see different aspects of both commitment and exploration. The idea here is that you reach a high level of exploration and a high level of commitment by the end of this stage. A low exploration level and a high commitment would be foreclosure. So they've basically made a decision without even thinking. A low commitment and a low exploration level would be identity diffusion. I don't know, and I don't care what I'm supposed to do with my life. A high level of exploration but low commitment would be a moratorium. I'm thinking about what I should do. I'm going to try this out. Nope. Now I'm going to try this out. Nope. Now I'm going to try this out. And then again, the ideal is to have identity achievement. This is a high level of exploration and a high level of commitment. I thought about it and I know what I should do with my life. It's a commitment after a period of soul searching. And that is it for section 2. Developmental theories. In our next video, we'll be talking about adolescent development. I can't wait to see you then. Bye for now.